Welcome back. It's great to have reconnections happening on on the stage. It's fabulous. Yeah. So I hope you've had good lunches. So this panel is called Contextualizing Black Feminism. And, the Shining Lights book explores a time in the 80s and 90s when black signified a political identity or alliance related to the UK's colonial past, as opposed to sort of simply race. We've started talking about this already with Bernadine and Joy, and the book shines a light, very many puns today, on what was outside who were outside the tent. And the photographers in the book recognize the intertwined nature of race, gender, sexuality, class, long before ideas of intersectionality really became commonplace, or the term was coined. So I think what this panel will do is reflect on some of these interrelated states, both thinking about the past, but also thinking about contemporary experiences and where we are today. So it's a hybrid panel. We're going to try it out. But I'll introduce all three speakers now, and then we'll sort of go back, and then we'll either see or really actually just hear Mumtaz on the screen. So first up, we'll have Mumtaz Karimji. Mumtaz was born in Mumbai and first got into photography from a young age, but started making photos seriously when she went to the People's Republic of China as a student in between 1978 and 1980. In 1983, Mumtaz gave up academia and became an independent photographer, initially making exhibitions about her Chinese experience and moving on to do mostly community work. Mumtaz's key projects include Women in China, 1949 to 1985, which showed in 1983, Notes from the City of the Sun from 1985, My Mothers and Sisters from 1988, In Search of an Image, also from 1988, various others, including The Clock Ticks On, Palestine, Reflections of the Occupied Territories, also from 1988, and Memories from 1994. So many more things to say in biographies, but I would just be going on and on. So you'll hear from Mumtaz in a moment. After that, we'll have Eileen Perrier. Eileen is a London-born photographer of Ghanaian and Dominican heritage, whose work explores themes of cultural identity, placement, and diversity. Her early projects, influenced by African portraiture, began after a formative visit to Ghana in 1995, which deepened her understanding of her identity as a Londoner of African descent. Since 1999, her work has been widely exhibited, both nationally and internationally, including the Photographers Gallery, Tate Britain, it's a long list, Tate Britain, Whitechapel Gallery, and the Centre Pompidou. Most recently, her work is featured in the group exhibition The Missing Thread, Untold Stories of Black British Fashion at Somerset House. Beyond her photographic practice, Eileen has been a senior photography lecturer in higher education for two decades. She's also served as board member of the Photographers Gallery, London Print Studios, and was chair of panels for the photography charity 100 Heroines. Great. And after that, we'll have Poulomi Desai. Poulomi, born in London, is a self-taught multidisciplinary artist, curator, and carer, with over 30 years of work spanning performance, sound, live art, and photography. She founded Shakti, the first South Asian LGBTQ+ club and organization, the NAS HIV/AIDS Project, and HACK, co-founded, and HACK, a South Asian punk performance company. She was involved with the Anti-Fascist Action and was a senior campaigns officer at the Race Equality Unit at Ealing Council from 1987 to 1990, when it was attacked and raided by a newly elected Tory council. Almost there. Her works are featured in the Heritage Key archives, and she has exhibited and performed at venues such as Serpentine Gallery, the Photographers Gallery, Autograph, and the Sonic Acts Festival, as well as more recently Tate Britain's Women in Revolt. and I could go on, but again, we'll we'll hear from all of them also about some of these works, I think, and for now, we'll try to see if we can go online and see Mumtaz or hear from Mumtaz. Thank you. Hi, Mumtaz, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. In my practice, I did a lot of experimental work, and most of the work I took was on color slides. And this image in particular was originally on color slide, but I printed it on black and white. This slide hasn't come out very well, but it was taken in Palestine, actually in Gaza, I think. When I went there, I can't remember when, many years ago. And it's basically an experiment of doing a color slide on black and white paper. Shall we go to the next? This one is an image from my sister's, and it was taken in India, I think in 1986. I can't remember exactly. And she's a potter woman making clay pots. And I quite liked the image. Okay. This is in Bangalore, in India as well. And it's the only women's bookshop in India that I could find. And the two women are workers at the bookshop. And I went to Bangalore when I was in India once, and I spent a lot of time with the women in the bookshop. It was quite a success, the bookshop itself. I was quite surprised by that, but it was. Okay, next slide. This is an experimental slide. I don't know how well you can see it. But what happened was it's a double exposure. I put the same film through the camera twice, and this came out quite well. I included it, I think it's in Notes from the City of the Sun. And it's a poem called Boundary. It was set to poetry by I was a student in China a long time ago, and it was set to poetry of the first democracy movement, and it was called Boundary. The color of the river changes the color of the sky, I think it goes. But anyway, it's a double exposure, and I particularly like this image. This is also China. After I was a student, I spent a lot of time in China as a tour guide. And this is taken in Sichuan, in southwest countryside. As you can see, there's at least 2 people coming through there. But it's one of my favorite photographs. Shall we go on to the next? This is the same photograph, but at that time, I was experimenting with Chrome, and I had a dark room at home, so it was possible for me to do that. And I had one of the earliest color enlargers. And so it was also possible for me to change the color of the original slide. Shall we go on? This is from my series called In Search of an Image. And it's the last photograph from, I think it's the Eastern disease. I call that panel. There's 2 panels and 1 photograph in between the 2 panels. And I think that one is the last photograph from the Eastern disease. Me looking at the camera with a pipe in my mouth. That thing there is a pipe. Yeah. And because at the time I was photographing, there was a lot of criticism in some ways of people who took photographs of other people. And it was a big thing. You weren't supposed to take photographs of other people. So I ended up, just like In Search of an Image, taking that photograph of myself, taking this self-portrait. And I like it because there's the camera in the middle. There's only a quarter of my face, but that's okay. And the background is of the room in my flat. Yeah, shall we change? Yeah. And these are again experimental photographs. I ended up calling them Mistress of the Waters, because I don't know if you can see, but there are actually shapes of women or of people in both the photographs. It was the original photograph from which this was taken is of a pebble beach, in fact, and all those white bits are the foam of the sea coming onto the beach. And I did a Rorschach image I stretched the beach and I did a Rorschach image of the beach. And that, again, was experimental with using color. I think it was the original was a black and white image. And I experimented with it using color because I had the color enlarger and it was possible to do that. Okay, is there anything else? Oh, that's it. That's very few pictures, but that's
Thank you so much, Mumtaz, for joining us. We're all really pleased to have you in the room, if not in person, but still with us here. So thank you. And we'll just ask Eileen to come up. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So Eileen Perrier here in the house. So I titled my 10-minute talk on my journey to Ghana. When I was in my final year of my degree, I decided to. Well, I was in my second year of my degree. The end of my second year of my degree, I went to Ghana with my mum. And so that's the title of the project's based around that. So Ghana to photography and a journey of image making, expression, heritage, and career success. Probably not career success, but I just thought to be positive, stay positive, stay positive. So I'm meant to move this, aren't I? Okay, is it like the big arrow going that way? Okay. So so I'm just going to be showing two projects today that are within the publication. So the two series I'll be sharing is from Ghana. So this was Ghana, which is part of my degree show project, and then the second series will be from the Afro Hair and Beauty series that I did over 5 years. So I always start with this image whenever I'm doing talks usually, and it's the black and white photograph is of my mum's first cousin, Auntie Teresa, with her dad and brother. And this photograph is in the family house in Ghana, my grandmother's house in Ghana. And in 1987, my sister died, and it was quite tragic. That was tragic, but Auntie Teresa and her husband had gone to Ghana for 3 years to find their family heritage, the African side of their family. They're half Ghanaian, and Auntie Teresa's mother's English, and I think Uncle Abraham's mother is, how can I put it? I won't talk about Uncle Abraham, I'll just talk about Auntie Teresa, because I don't want to get it wrong, and then he finds it and just goes, that was wrong, Eileen. So anyway, her father came to the UK around the time of the Titanic, so he served as a soldier. I think it would have been the First World War, and settled here, had a family, had 2 children, and obviously took this photograph, sent it back to Ghana. So Auntie Teresa had a small version of this photograph, and when they went to Ghana, they were told to find my mum back in the UK, so they had the address of my mum. So they her husband came to our house, and it was in 1987, so literally my sister had just passed. Oh my gosh, that's like 4 minutes have almost gone. I've just breathed. He brought a small version, literally was in the size of the palm of his hand. And he just said, he knocked on the door, rang the bell and said, we've just come to see you. We've been told to come and visit you. My mum was just a bit like, what? But because he had that photograph, my mum let him in, and we've stayed in touch with him ever since. So for Christmas now, I go there for Christmas time, have dinner at Auntie Teresa's, and and the other weird coincidence is Auntie Teresa's in-law, so her daughter-in-law, Auntie Mary, I hope you're following me, because I'm going around the houses, she used to go to the bakery that my mum used to work in, and she came with the granddaughter who's Essie, and my mum was like, Essie, what are you doing here? She said, I'm with the other grandma. So my mum had been connected to Auntie Mary, Auntie Mary's mother, like for years through the bakery. So it's just these weird coincidences. And then on top of, why are you laughing? Over there. What's the problem here? So like basically, oh boy, I knew I was going to mess this up, heckling and all that. So anyway, so basically, with Auntie Mary lives about 10 minutes away from where we live, so it's just weird how, family was so close, but because of, my mum leaving when she was 19 to come to the UK to start a new life here with her husband, that didn't work out. Ties kind of break, but with an amazing photograph like this that has stayed in the family, the legacy continues, and that reconnected me with with Auntie Teresa's side of the family. Okay, let me carry on. So it was amazing. So basically, I have to thank Anna Fox, Peter Kennard, because there was Peter Kennard, there was other tutors. Who else was there? Anna, at the time when you were Keith Arnett, Eve Lomax, but she was, Eve Lomax was there. David Bates, and who else? I'm trying to think of who else. But basically, they were amazing tutors at the time. Martin Parr, that's who was in my head. How can I forget Martin Parr? Anyway, so amazing tutors that I had while I was studying, doing my documentary degree in Farnham. And so I was in my second year, and the Labour government had brought in student loans. So that's how I got to Ghana with my mum. I used my student loan in my second year to pay for my flight, because I wouldn't have been able to afford it to have gone otherwise. And I took these amazing photographs. And this photograph is of Banner. She wore this dress at the airport when we came in the evening, and I just thought she looked really amazing and beautiful and powerful, so I asked her to wear the dress again so that I could photograph her in the backyard where we stayed. And I just loved the different references that were in the surrounds, in people's homes and also out and about. This image was in the countryside, so my mum kind of lived in two places. She lived in Accra, but she schooled in a place called Adumasi Krabo, which is in the countryside, and my mum inherited land there, which I've kind of inherited, and it's a bit of a nightmare. But anyway, it's fun. I have fun spiritually as well as in many other ways. And I mean spiritually, it's not a joke, trust me. But anyway, at the time of being quite naive, took these beautiful portraits, and I took him, and it was just amazing, the colours and the richness, because before doing this project in Ghana, most of my work, all of my work was in black and white up until this point, but it was really important for me to take the photographs in colour, because the images that I was seeing at the time, mainly reportage images or stuff that was shown in the media, mainly of charities of Africa, were in black and white, and they were very negative. So I felt that it was important for me to document my family or the people that I'd meet in Ghana in colour, because the conversations that were happening in the family house didn't represent what I was seeing in the media at the time. And this image actually got shown in the National Portrait Gallery as part of the Taylor Wesson, which is now, I don't know, what is it called? It's called the Taylor Wesson now, isn't it? Yeah. So that's, that's a success. I really loved, my mum used to love using baby powder on us. Now I've got asthma for the rest of my life because of it. But I like the juxtaposition of the white baby and the palm trees. I love those kind of things that were taking place in the images. And again, that's 8 minutes. I've got 2 minutes left, guys. Okay. So basically, just again, taking portraits of just family members, and they'd say, oh, we know you, Grace. That's my mum's name. And my mum didn't know who they were, but she'd say hi. And I just kind of just documented things. I couldn't understand people when they weren't speaking English. But I had a similar experience to Joy. When I got to Ghana, I was, like, the heat was intense and I wanted to kiss the ground. I was so excited. And as the 10 days that I was there went on, I just heard people kept saying Blafomi, and I was like, what is that? And it basically meant the white girl, probably. So it was just like, anyway. So on my return from Ghana, I just realised how important my mum's family had been. So to her being here in the UK, and so as part of my degree show as well, I documented my family in their homes, and it was called the Red, Gold and Green series. And so I went around family members' homes. I think I asked a couple of the tutors, it might have been Dave Daggers at the time, to give me advice on how to light the subjects. And basically went around people's homes, got some fabric, stuck it on their walls. And I thought people would just have their portraits taken as they were when I came into their homes, but no, people like to look good. So basically they would disappear, they'd be in their gym jams or their slippers, or tracksuit bottoms or whatever it is they'd be wearing. Or, here's an African mum, there'd be the cloth wrapped around in the house, right? But no, they'd disappear and then they'd put an outfit on. So, So in this photograph, Auntie Gladys, she's in the centre, and that's her two grandchildren in the foreground. And then my mum's half-sister, Auntie Emily, is on your right. And Auntie Mateko is on the left. And then Auntie Emily's husband is in the middle, and their two sons. So I'll carry on. And then there's my mum with Auntie Gladys. And Auntie Gladys, she was like one of the first truck drivers in Ghana. She was well connected. There was a second time when I went to Ghana with my mum, and Auntie Gladys went as well. She'd had a stroke. So she'd had a stroke maybe about 30 years ago, which was really sad, but she was just strong. She passed away last year. She was just so amazing. So when she used to get to the airport, she just would just go through. Because she knew everyone because of being this famous truck driver. Anyway, with this particular image, I wanted to share it because it was a turning point in terms of with this series. I remember one of the tutors saying they really liked the Jesus in the corner and the wallpaper, like having that sense of the domestic setting in the image. And I wanted everything to be perfect. So this is before Photoshop. So I wanted to, if Photoshop had been around, that would have been cropped, everything would have been cleaned. But, now I really loved that, and that hint of Jesus there, as well as being in Ghana that you saw earlier. So this is Auntie Mary. So that's Auntie Teresa's daughter-in-law, and that's my mum again. So my mum features quite a lot in this series. And that's my mum's kente cloth that she would have brought in the 60s when she came. So this is another success. Now I understand why I put success in my title, because I was wondering why I did that at the time. So Autograph commissioned me in 1987, and that was again thanks to Anna Fox, who told me to take my work to them. So Anna, you're going to feature quite a lot in my talk today. And it's funny, Anna's embarrassed, and she's usually never embarrassed. But yeah, thanks to Anna, and she was also, Anna Fox and Val Williams were the first to show my work when I graduated. And Anna's been a real supportive person, and she's been like a mentor in my life for many, many years, so I'm very grateful to her. And I mean that, Anna, you know that. Yeah. Autograph commissioned me, and that really changed I guess, the trajectory of my life in a way. It was quite amazing, because I'd say that I come from humble beginnings, okay? So come from a single-parent household, council flat, still living in that flat. And but it's very Gigi now, like to be in that area. I wasn't meant to be here today in a way, but I was really lucky. I was really lucky that I met people along the way. So one of the first people who I met, who I loved so much, I loved their work, was Armit Francis. I remember seeing his book in a black bookshop on Goulburn Road with this black woman's face on it. It was what's it called? What's the book called? The Black Triangle, yeah? And that was amazing, seeing that when I was age 17, and the fact that there was a British photographer who'd gone, well, Jamaican British photographer who'd done images in the UK, the US, and Africa, and the West Indies. And I was blown away. I was blown away that someone had done that, because most of the works that I was looking at the time were from America. And then also finding out Ahmet was also one of the founders of Autograph as well. And it was just really weird how my path kind of shifted and moved, and how can I put it? I just feel like I've been very, very lucky. I'll carry on showing the portraits because my time has actually run out, but I'm going to just keep going. So this is Auntie Teresa, who was in the first photograph, but now in 1997. And Uncle Mark with his two daughters. And yeah, I guess the way in which people were posing themselves, I didn't realise that there was like an African style of photography. And again, Anna, you come up here because you told me about Seda Keite's work, and you told me about being, well, you didn't say I was part of, I've just coined that now for myself, but there was African studio photography, and I wasn't aware of that when I was taking these portraits. And then I sort of looked back at my mum's archive and thought, actually, I've been around all of this stuff all this time and didn't realise it. And the way in which people position themselves, sit, have their hands placed in a certain way, it's part of the history, I guess, of how people like to be represented in photographs. These are some more photographs. That's my mum's half-sister, younger half-sister. And I love this one because it shows, well, I thought they were the same auntie, but they're not. They've just got the same handbag. But they have got different wigs. So that's how I realised they're different. But what I love is that they've gone to the same studio, but they've got the African attire and then the Western attire. And that's what my family were doing when I was doing the Red, Gold and Green series, which was really lovely. And, looking back, having space to kind of think about something I was doing, I'd say, well, I guess you could say it's naively, but just doing it organically, and then being able to look back and just see that there is this history of African studio photography that has been there. So moving on to the Afro Hair and Beauty series. So that kind of came out of, I guess it was me, and my family, again, it was a personal project, and Blue Magic was very important in our household. My mum used to like to press her hair with it. She trained as a hairdresser. So I did a series of hair products, like really cheap kitsch hair products, and I'm just showing you one of them here today. And then in 1998, I wanted to take portraits of women. Well, I didn't know no, that's a lie. I wanted to go to the Afro Hair and Beauty show, which used to take place at Alexandra Palace, and document whatever was going on there. And that always happens on a bank holiday weekend in May. It's in the May bank holiday weekend. I hope I've got that right. It's now at the Business Design Centre, but while it was at the Alexandra Palace, I went there over 5 years, and I did these portraits. So this was the first year that I went, and I photographed loads of different things, but I also photographed people, including this sitter who's become very, very famous. Yes, and I love this because the backdrop was the Dark and Lovely it was a Dark and Lovely advert on a bus, so I used that as a backdrop just by chance. And I think all three of these people that I photographed were models at the time. They were models in terms of they were doing stuff at their hair show at the time. So yeah, and then I continued the next year. I wanted just to document the regular punters who came in, like I was coming in as well, and I just took their photographs in a different location each time. This was by the toilets, but there was a really nice lighting up, it was daylight. You're now laughing. Oh gosh, okay. Anyway, I'll carry on. But they look cool, no? And the reason why I did this as well is because at the time, you didn't see black women or men in advertising. Like now, these images almost feel like, I don't know if I would take these images now because of what I'm seeing in adverts, but at the time, you wasn't seeing that type of representation, in mass media. So yeah, so it was really important for me to document people who looks like me, but looks good, I wanted people to look good. And Dawood Bey was a real big influence in this work. I remember seeing his work at the Barbican, which was curated by Autograph, and it was his 2024 Polaroid portraits, and that really had an impact on me in being able to represent people like myself. And I was commissioned by Angel Row Gallery to do this series, and then I started to incorporate men. So that's it, really. And I just wanted to end with saying, I had so much more that I wanted to say, but I just wanted to say thanks to Joy Gregory, because I remember when I was starting out as well, I remember going to a talk at the 198 Gallery, I think it was, and I remember there was something being said about, you know, your work, whether it was black enough. I remember it was about black artists, and this whole talk of if someone's work was black enough or not. And I just remember at the time thinking, Joy's black woman, that's enough. You know, me being who I am is enough. The work doesn't always have to include the figure in the work. But for these series were important for me to have people in the work, but other projects that I do haven't. And in terms of the educational context, I'm really glad that there is this publication that's come out, because being in higher education and always telling students about Autograph or Innova and other, artists in general, it's just great that there's this publication that's there for us to, direct people to, not just us, but like tutors across the board. And I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you, Eileen.
There is going to be an image up here, I think. Frame one, just still. So I was really thinking about when I got the brief, and I was trying to think of where would you find me amongst the black. It was actually a play, but I'll talk about that later. So what I'm going to be showing is a visual backdrop with stuff I've been experimenting with AI and its biases inbuilt, and thinking about blackness within that, as well as South Asianness and diaspora. But I'm sort of going to give a talk. So I want to thank Joy, of course, and the crew for shining lights for this book. It also makes me realise just how much more work institutions need to do as well. And you can find a bit of me online, and on Tumblr, as well as elsewhere. So I'm going to talk while this plays, and hopefully I can stick to 9 minutes now. So if you could play it, please. So what were the key significant moments for me during the turbulent and violent 70s and 80s, with strikes, protests, uprisings, police brutality in the UK that I grew up in, which feels so long ago now, that would convey in some meaningful way the breadth of black and black British that we used in the UK up and down the country as a political identity for unity and class struggles. It was different to the American black power that we had inherited. For me and my comrades, friends, loves, and activists, including those that had disagreements and split up, black meant a deliberate, class-conscious desire to bring all those that had come to this country and born here due to British slavery and colonial imperialism. And they were at the forefront of anti-racism across all areas of life in the UK. And this included Caribbean, African, Asian, Latin, and mixed American. It was inclusive of Chinese and Arab origin diasporas as well, because we were all under attack and discriminated against. It was about connecting with other people's struggles internationally and confronting power. Organisations such as the Race Today Collective, with black women such as Layla Hassan and Mala Sen, both had been part of the British Black Panthers, the Indian Workers Association and the Institute of Race Relations, especially when they had a sort of coup in 1972 and became completely radical and produced Race Today publication. All this had a massive influence on the organisation of political black struggles within a Marxist framework that influenced the Global South and vice versa, and trade unionism, of course. It allowed for ethnic differences under this red umbrella. But what was missing in the face of both casual and violent sexism, a time when rape wasn't considered serious, and we must have been asking for it after all as women? Where were the new alliances that had to be melded, that included our fuller black identities outside of marriage and straightness, as working class women, as black lesbian Zami, as after Audre Lorde, or for me, what is now called pansexual? beyond the one mainly focused on anti-racism, anti-colonialism, with women's liberation sort of tacked on? How could I share this personally with you all and allow for the failure to convey any meaning? Looking through my own archives, which are huge and a bit of a mess now, I found myself overwhelmed with facts and figures, photos, plays, diaries, writings, other people's pictures, my pictures, publications and pamphlets. So I decided to share a few very personal experiences, maybe to illustrate, spill the beans, and maybe cut the beanstalk as well. So I wanted to illustrate some of the joys and some of the lessons learnt the hard way. It will not be exhaustive, objective, and may not be relevant, nor coherent. And I will interchange here between black and Asian, but it still means black feminism in some way or another way, a moving non-static entity as always. So I'm going to talk a little bit of, I very rarely talk about personally, but I'm going to talk a little bit about childhood trauma. I'm getting older. Luckily, I don't have as big a family as Eileen, so it'll be restricted. My dad was violent and big, hence me. My mum was small and now smaller at the age of 95. Erin Pizzey, that set up Chiswick Women's Aid in 1972, turned us away from her home that was a refuge for women as we wouldn't fit in. I was 7 and remember being terrified. The first many examples of the wider women's liberation movement and their racism or their xenophobia or their stereotypes, especially of us as Asian women, we're just going to get arranged marriage, how terrible our cultures are, etc., oppressing women. So I experienced that, many others experienced it. Not to say that there weren't some white women who became mum's best friends later. My mum did learn from experience. She later opened up her own home when she got it at the age of 50 to black women, as white women's groups specifically turned away Asian women. It was not a good time for us. We didn't fit into wider Asian communities, as the stigma of divorce was strong in the 70s, even though communities gathered and there'd been strikes like the Grunwick and supported each other on one level, as long as you fitted in a normative family. And I remember vaguely her gathering a coterie of rebels who had arrived in the early 60s, just like her, who'd had hopes and dreams based on all that bohemian English literature and politics and music and European avant-garde promise, etc., including an amazing, classically trained, theatre-wise actress called Charubala, who appeared on our TV screens in the 70s with a program called Mind Your Language, with its xenophobic stereotypes. I mean, she did it just to get a job that paid in something closer to what she'd loved, along with so many other arduous sitcoms that forced amazing black actors to go native. It was still better than seeing the comedian so loved by this country, Spike Milligan, painting himself brown. I mean, this continued right up to Little Britain, that programme. There were stories about my liberal grandmother, though poor in India and Africa, made sure the girls got an education and had freedoms only rich girls had, and the anarcho uncles from India who fought in the Spanish Civil War. I discovered the abuse horror stories later and also had experiences within the family that geared me towards finding solace elsewhere. I was brought to a borough called Harrow in 73, where the organised far right, the National Front, with their boot boys on the street throughout the UK and endorsed by some MPs who were in Parliament, and actually they were card-carrying members as well in those days. My mum was teaching children whose parents were actual members and had big posters of the far right everywhere. And as she says, she was the first black teacher in the borough, and that was only reluctantly due to some of the Race Relations Act, but it didn't last long. So as a teenager in the 70s, I was an outsider. I had racist names calling by whites, blacks, Asians, my feature of having this shade of skin, my curly hair, quite a wide nose, big hips, too tall for an Asian girl, my weird dress sense down to mum dressing me up multicultural, meant I was game for everyone. So my mum, Neeru, was a teacher and activist in London during the late 70s in Haringey and Hackney, more progressive boroughs. She also worked with Berkshire, interestingly enough, in those days was really advanced around multilingualism, bilingualism. Very interesting, the sort of work they were doing and the things they were producing for both teachers. She was also part of the ILEA, which was the Inner London Education Authority that had an overview for education because it had all come out through sort of socialist ideas of progressing people's lives. She knew so many people like Amrit Wilson, who wrote the seminal book Finding a Voice, Sister Culture, who was a DJ in Brixton, Pratibha Parmar, who's here tonight, when she was a youth worker in Leicester at the time, people like John LaRose, and of course Professor Stuart Hall. In the educational cultural activist context, they weren't all famous then. My mum's identity as a black woman and Asian woman was very clear about fighting racism and sexism, as well as the issues within our communities around anti-blackness and anti-Asian. I do remember being called coolie girl as well. And also about women around violence. She still identifies as a black feminist, so her influence was deep, and I was fortunate enough to meet many activists and cultural theorists. I had the great joy as a young teen of being taken to Jessica and Eric Huntley's, or as I was told by mum to call them auntie and uncle, bogle over to a bookshop and event space in Ealing to get away from Harrow, where my mum and myself would recite poetry, me ranting generally. There were other community and youth spaces all over, Bradford, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool. There were protests, uprisings. They fought the racist, they tackled police brutality, unlawful discrimination, employment, housing and education, and organised socials to bring communities together. There was a pride in this melding of multi-ethnic, multi-racial, mixed, working class groups coming together. That strength, unfortunately, does not seem to have featured so much in our black archives today. Do I have time? Yeah? Okay. But again, men dominated these narratives and relative power, and there was always sexism, homophobia, inbuilt, and violence. Let's face it, many of us still made the tea, so to speak, and weren't taken seriously. This gave rise to groups such as the Manchester Black Women's Cooperative that became OWAD, as was mentioned earlier, Southall Black Sisters, ILGA, the Black Lesbian and Gay Centre, and so many more. By the way, that doesn't mean it was utopia. I mean, for me, it means it gave possibilities for action that addressed the need for black women's safer spaces. So one of my life journeys started as a 13-year-old through music, classical, filmy, disco, punk and reggae, looking for like-minded young black people like me, because I was in Harrow, remember. It led me to Southall, Brixton and Hounslow. It led me to Southall Black Sisters. It led me to Lorna G, and again to DJ Sister Culture in Brixton, who ran sound systems, club nights specifically for black women. It led me to co-ops such as Hounslow Arts Co-op, that I set up with her at the RI in Southall in 1981, where we set about telling our stories of love, sex, drugs, crime, sexism, racism. It was the first and second generation experience, poverty, what is now called queer love, hatred, all in performance and exhibitions, and some of that is online and can be found. It also led us to Double Edge, the Black Theatre Company, Double Edge Theatre in Camden, Black Mime, and so much more like Carly Theatre. It led to being in bands, performance, photography, art, street theatre. It also opened my eyes to the battles within our collectives and moments of joy, and the sadness caused by those you most trusted. So I'm quickly going to rattle through a sort of list of memories of inspiration and learning, and they're not in date order, and they may be flawed and hazy. Not everything was solidarity or hearts and rainbows. And there was a fragmentation between this idea within Black, the African, Caribbean, and Asian, and people did really hate each other for all sorts of reasons. By the way, I was never part of the Black arts movement, so I didn't go to art school, so I can't really speak on this and the battles within the institutions that they had and were and still necessary. But I was part of anti-fascist action, and we were literally fighting fascists on the streets up and down the country in black populated areas. So I'm going to quickly say a couple of more things. Sham, derived from the Sanskrit word shama, which translates to dark blue or black. Black is identified with power within Sanskrit. I remember as a kid, my mum singing her own songs and making sure I got out in the sun and played. She wasn't scared about her daughter becoming Gari in Gujarati, black, compared to many, both Asian and Caribbean friends. In fact, she said you would be like Kali, the Indian sort of goddess, Sanskrit goddess. Although it didn't stop her venting her own anger about my life. And some of my work in this book, Red Threads, that was published in 2003, but it's stuff from the 80s, is there. I wanted to mention the joys of working with Brenda Agard, photographer and beloved mentor for me when I was 18 on a large-scale community play in Lambeth, post the Brixton uprisings or riots. You were still missed, Brenda, very much so. We highlighted police brutality, talked about love within our black communities and the contradictions and the possibility for creating something different. Finding the Black Lesbian Group in Camden, remembering the Greater London Council and June Giovanni's film events, such as the Third Eye Film Festival in 1983, dancing at the Berlin King's Cross at Women's Nights, and meeting so many amazing black women, and being asked at the end of the night, can I smudge your lipstick? Okay, I'm going to say something a little bit negative here, but it was real, so I think it's important to remember some of the contradictions. A note to Linton Kwesi Johnson. I learnt from him that you shouldn't meet the people you really look up to. When you ran away with the two blokes you brought with you, who were really big and a bit hairy, but anyway, when you're invited to a black poetry evening organised by teenagers in the 80s, and when the far right turn up at Hounslow Civic Centre, and you run away with them and leave us there, it doesn't look good for our memories. Anti-fascist action, class war, up and down the country. The day we fought in Toxteth against the fascists and I got blood on my 12-hole DMs. On protest, self-defence is no offence. The Newham 7 campaigns, those pictures which will be shown at the Tate 80s exhibition that's coming up in November. And justice for the racist murder of Eustace Price. Black gay men's parties in Brixton, dancing to Boogie Banton with George Shire, celebrating with South for Black Sisters, the change in the law to recognise rape in marriage, and later the release of Kiranjit Ahluwalia, then fighting with South for Black Sisters as it fragmented between Afro-Caribbean and Asian women split over electric shock therapies. Dancing at the Saturday nights at the London Women's Centre at Wild Court in Holborn, organised by Rochelle and her crew, but kicked in the head by the girlfriend for no reason of a well-known South Asian filmmaker. Meeting Nina Simone at Ronnie Scott's by sneaking in from upstairs, creating sound art and photography workshops in prisons, and meeting black incarcerated men and their backgrounds, working in hospitals with black women's groups, working on the beach in clubs and a bit like somebody said in toilets. I think it was Bernadine, working as a senior campaigns officer in the Race Equality Unit. It was actually 94, and there was a lot of anti-apartheid work we were doing, but also there was a film that came out called Black Pearl, which talked about black miners, and also related to the solidarity with South African miners as well. Organising black, lesbian and gay poetry and performance events at Ealing in 1987, 88 with people like Gabriella Pierce, Savitri Hensman, Doug Abe Richards. It all led to the co-founding of Shakti with Shivananda Khan when he first came to meet me there in 87, which I funded. The first meeting of Shakti, which was the first UK South Asian LGBT group. And later, we also co-founded the NAS HIV/AIDS project. And all of us dancing at Shakti nights in the late 80s at the Lesbian and Gay Centre, which is no longer here, but I think there's a new place going to set up. Meeting Joy Gregory at a Pride event in London when she was working on a Blondes project. She was so shy and so sweet. And she was like, I don't want to ask anybody. And I was a bit drunk. So I said, look, just pretend to be my girlfriend and we'll traipse around. And we flounced around so she could get the pictures she wanted. And they were amazing. So I did show work because Janice Chetty is here and she worked with Keith Piper and Derek Richards. So it was quite seminal, but I was a bit bored because it was really old work, but I was really excited to show at the Photographers Gallery in 1997. And that was incredible, but it was work from the 80s. Finally, I'd like to just say, meeting June Jordan, and that was thanks to Pratibha, the activist, poet and educator. Her warmth and humour, and it's as if she's still here with me, and I continually look at this book, and I think the final pictures there from the AI stuff was trying to address some of the stuff that she wrote about and many feminists, black feminists, talked about, that international connection. So I'm just going to read a tiny extract to finish. I won't read the whole thing because it will take too much time. So it is just the last bit of it because I think it's relevant today, and she wrote it in 1982. It's called Moving Towards Home. I need to speak about living room, where the talk will take place in my language. I need to speak about living room, where my children will grow without horror. I need to speak about living room, where the men of my family between the ages of 6 and 65 are not marched into a roundup that leads to the grave. I need to talk about living room, where I can sit without grief, without wailing aloud for my loved ones, where I must not ask where is Abu Fadi, because he will be there beside me. I need to talk about living room, because I need to talk about home. I was born a black woman, and now I'm become a Palestinian, against the relentless laughter of evil, there is less and less living room. And where are my loved ones? It is time to make our way home. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you, and also to Mumtaz. This has been such a rich hour, I think, of talks. I want to say that Mumtaz is not joining us online for Q&A, so maybe we want to, do a round of applause and say thank you, and then she's not joining for Q&A. So the Q&A will be just the two of you. But
I don't know what to say.
well, we haven't asked the questions yet. Yeah. I have quite a few questions, but we're running behind, so we'll start with the floor and then, continue.
Hello. That was amazing from all three of you. Thank you so much. Eileen, I've got a question for you. So I'm a huge fan, and I think your work is so incredible. But I've actually struggled finding your work online, and I wondered if there was a reason why there's only very few images online of your work, and why you decided, because I feel like it's a deliberate decision.
What, me?
Yeah.
I've got my website.
Yeah, but I feel like...
Hello? Can you hear me? It doesn't sound like you can hear me. Okay. Yeah, I've got my website. I've got Instagram.
Yeah, I just felt like...
You know why? Shall I tell you why? Because they thief online. Once your stuff... We were talking about it earlier. Once your stuff's online, it's not yours anymore as well. So maybe there's that going on as well. You need to come and see me. My number's on my website. I shouldn't be saying that. Oh my gosh, it's like... You're going to all be calling me now! Change my number. No, call me. Come and have a look. There's stuff at Autograph. There's a few projects there. Yeah. They have an archive. They've got two... No. They've got a little collection, yeah.
Thank you.
What do you think I should do? Advice? There might be something next year. Shall I say, Bindi? Is that all right to say? Okay, hopefully, if I sign the contract, there'll be a show next year. Yeah. Is that all right, Bindi?
Amazing. Do you have more hands raised? Okay, yeah, we do.
Hi, okay, can you hear me? My question's for Palomi. Just a simple question. So your work is preliminary driven by AI, so I was wondering what inspired you to kind of integrate AI in your work?
So preliminary, I couldn't hear the last bit.
As driven by AI, so your artwork is kind of...
Oh, no, that's just what I showed. The original stuff is like experimental stuff on hands-on, darkroom experiments, early stuff. No, sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Yeah,
it was for this, I wanted to show you some of the stuff I'm exploring right now to do with AI and biases, to try and tell stories that I was telling before. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I sort of barked at everybody, didn't I? So, yeah, you might have missed that. No, but there's some AI stuff that I'm exploring.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about AI and biases and where that's going?
Yeah, exactly.
Boobs. Oh, you probably saw that. I mean, it was, I'm pretty articulate when I want to be, and I was really trying hard text to image. But yeah, it's the same boobs. And you say sort of normal side or large, or it's because the data sets are all obviously online and whatever, depending on which software or which data sets have been used. But these are idealized images or just advert images or what have you, there's a plethora of them, of course. Magazine images, everything that's online with this idealized certain skin colored. I wouldn't even say white because it's sort of, I wouldn't even say tanned. Kim Kardashian type, but it's each from the slimmer ones. So you've got the Vogue types or whatever. So there's just this whole plethora. So And that's the other thing, with certain words, I think you might have seen the last bit. So if I was talking about the so-called Middle East, Swana region, or trying to talk about the past, or bringing in trying to imagine something to do with both environment, political, land, it was really, so you're getting these sort of juxtapositions. I didn't show you the stuff that was all just like what looked like Israeli soldiers. That was it, really. You know, even when I was using totally different words to do with geography words and historical and cultural words. So though it's just early days yet to explore this. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think this also just brings me to the question that I had about, I was really struck by how so much of the work you showed was very personal, and also thinking about, you know, solidarities and creating solidarities. We talked about sort of Black as political allegiance, solidarity across sort of geopolitical borders, and I was wondering what, where you are now with your work in terms of the personal and political solidarities, and it doesn't have to be like what you think necessarily, but I think this is an interesting point that you brought up as well, Paulomi, in terms of what changes with the way algorithms work, but also how we step away, where are we going?
Yeah. You know what's, can I say something? Yeah. It's really funny because hearing you, I'm just thinking, Jesus Christ, you had a lot going on. And even like, when I think of my life, I just think it was so soft and easy in a way. In the 90s, 2000s, like even sometimes I think, why am I in that book? Because I'm like near the end. And I think, when I went to uni, like it was good. The student loan had just come in and now it's a flipping disaster for education now, like it's awful what's happened in education, I think, in higher education. And, but yeah, when, even like went to the Royal College, there were 15 of us on a course. It was very elite. I had one of my alumni from 10 years ago who just graduated from the Royal College, and I think there's like 90 students or 100 for a cohort. So it's almost like a very different landscape. And I remember during lockdown, just, I felt like a lot of things had changed. Quite small changes, but there'd been changes, positive changes. And then during lockdown, with what happened with George Floyd, I just thought, oh my gosh, like nothing's changed. And it's upsetting. I think that really, for my mental health, physical health, going through the perimenopause, didn't help. And I kind of had to have a pause at that point, and but at the same time, I wanted to say I'm grateful for the pioneers that came before in the 60s, 70s, 80s, because without those artists, those photographers, those activists in all shapes and forms, I wouldn't have had, for me, I don't know how other artists feel at the time that I was around, but I wouldn't have had the privilege that I had in higher education at that time. And even in school, like, the relationships I had with my teachers was amazing in primary school, secondary school. I guess a lot of the people who were teaching at that time were working class, but they'd obviously they shifted into careers that made them middle class, so they were quite supportive of people who were coming through. I don't know if I'm making sense. Whereas now it feels like it's shifted again. So yeah, it's quite sad in a way, but at the same time, this year I decided just to go freelance this year, and I'm in this studio. It's peer-to-peer, and it's within Metroland, and I'm not the oldest person there, and but what's really lovely is, this sounds really patronising. I'm not meaning to be patronising, but I'm so grateful that there are the people who are up and coming, like yourself, so intelligent, so beautiful, and so mindful of what you're doing. Is the word woke? Is that the right word? Am I using it in the right context? I don't know if is that the negative? I don't know. Anyway, but you're so on it. You're on it, and it's good to know that there are young people, or younger, like 20s, 30s, that are coming up who, are activists, are fighting as well for their rights now. you know, because I feel like there's been a period where it wasn't like that, if you see what I mean, between the 90s and 2000s. I might be wrong, but maybe that's the life I was living, and because I was in higher education and things are probably like, la, 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 and I live in my little bubble. So I'll leave it there. I don't know if I made any sense, but I'll leave it there.
Very much.
I'll pass it to you.
No, there was stuff in the 90s because there was racism on the streets, there was police brutality, but the 80s, you've got to remember,
Talking about late
2000s,
90s,
people were still organising because there were still some organisations there on the street and stuff. Up and down the country, because it's not just London-centric, of course, and it's also thinking about the city as opposed to the rural areas, so makes a big difference.
But that's why it's good hearing you, because it's like your life, work, experience, it just feels like it's, you know, I feel like it's a totally different life to what I had.
Yeah, but mine wasn't necessarily typical. I mean, you've got to remember the 80s was full of what would be now called bling. There were people making money. There were black people also wearing Hugo Boss suits and drinking champagne, and there was money being made on the stock market and all of that as well. There was this other side to it. So it was also a struggle for the people who were activists and organising women's refuges and black queer space, well, what's now called queer, black, lesbian, gay spaces, and it was really hard. Plus, you didn't get into clubs, and white clubs as well, white gay clubs. There was racism was pretty bad. So there were also communities who just wanted to put their heads down and get on as well. We mustn't forget that. And there were people who also got very good local authority jobs up and down the country in quite senior positions and went slightly beyond the middle class, you know, earned good salaries, whether it was in housing or employment. So, and I think some cuts were going on in education as well.
It's always gone on, but it just feels like it's,
Yeah. I mean, there were racist murders going on as well in the 90s and 2000s. So.
It's been ongoing, that, isn't it, really?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about, you mentioned, okay, so the 80s and the 90s were periods of kind of like introducing this idea that even black and brown people can be capitalists, even black and brown people can be millionaires, and that now that's like a very prominent idea as well that a lot of people obviously feel deeply uncomfortable about, because it's kind of this idea of just because a historically marginalized person is now a millionaire, that's not a good thing necessarily. The problem is still wealth inequality, and I wonder in terms of that what representation means for you, because I think a lot about the photographers and the photographs that we share in The Road to Nowhere and I cover in my work, and I'm always thinking about making sure to represent an array of experiences, but at the same time I feel like it's sometimes like just this idea of stereotypes and how to move away from stereotypes, and what is representation for you individually?
Just
Big question.
I think what you just said, I feel like things are more stereotyped now in a way, in some respects. I feel like in terms of like I look at adverts now, and some are quite interesting, they're quite clever, and you think, I wonder who's been part of that. And then there's other stuff where you just think, oh, what's going on there? Do you know what I mean? There's, I think what you said before about social media has changed so much. It's changed the way in which, you know, the black presence is represented in mass media. So I think it's quite blurred. In a way, I think, like, say, for example, looking at the people that you're representing, I feel like things are more kind of segregated in a way. People segregate more. So people choose the artists or the people that are associated to them in some respects, which is good in one way, but at the same time, it means that other people are left out again. So it's a hard one, but that's just my opinion of what I see. I don't know if I've answered your question, but it feels like it's to be PC or to be everyone's trying to do the right thing, but at the same time it means that it kind of makes it a bit bitty in some ways. And then at the same time it's really great seeing everything being the way it is in terms of advertising. I'm talking more about what I see generally when I'm going out and about.
That's why I stay at home.
Oh, really?
I have to care for my mum. Okay, I think the shift is 9/11, etc. And I think the idea of representation, we have to basically talk about the representation of Muslims, Islam, etc., the extremes of it. It's funny when you get South Asians from this country who go to Hollywood and then play terrorists, for example, on a plane, etc. They've got to make a living. So I think that's, for me, is key. And I think some of the work that you're doing with photographers there, online as well, it's important. It's very important. I think there's also music festivals as well that tie in with that. I think also probably thinking about, I don't want to promote it because I think it might be Qatari money and I might get into trouble for promoting it. I don't care. Mosaic, for example, the gallery in London, and there's quite a few, or what Sharjah is doing itself and how it connects within the global south, especially, rather than coming to Europe and talking to Europe. And I think how the global south has now been doing their own exchanges. So India will speak directly to New Zealand, or India will speak to Japan, or Japan will speak directly to Dubai, or whatever it might be. And I think there's a shift there of, as you said, wealth, because that is driven by money. And I'm just trying to think of what I may have noticed within the sort of group circles. Certainly, I've been doing a lot more mentoring online since COVID, where much younger people who are even in their teenager are organising themselves from Fiji to Singapore, but they have to use VPNs in some of these places, to Himachal Pradesh. And it's queer communities who are actually working with quite poor communities in their countries of origin, in the villages, but then through that sort of widening the debate around life and living and identity and representation. And that has been fascinating for me. And I had no idea that was there until, I think it's a group at SOAS that got in touch with me to start doing that. And that has been fantastic. It's also meeting younger artists like Raju Rage and various other people who are taking up. Yeah, absolutely. But then you see the support that they need as well. So I've got a whole load of Raju Rage's recipes for, not insurrection, recipes for resistance, if anybody wants to buy one, to talk to me, because they're all sitting at my place on a shelf. It's also about spaces. I think people are recreating spaces, like Decolonise, I think, had a space. Although, again, that's cities. But I'm also seeing it in this country, where people in rural areas, like something like Newton Abbot, Dartington, people are creating these spaces again. And I think that's going to be key for the future. Also, green spaces, community green spaces that are set up, and how that ties in with politics. I see that as something that I personally want to do as well, where I live, because I live next door to my mum, and we've got 2 gardens. So I'm looking at projects there, and I have a friend who's got a farm with horses and stuff, and she comes out of a black Asian politic, but a bit younger than me. So we're looking at how we can network and get people together. And now we're a bit older and have not spare cash, I wouldn't say. Otherwise, you're all going to come and talk to me after. But we're going to try and mobilise that money. I'd like to see more black artists actually doing that who've been successful. I have been nagging people like John Comfer and all sorts about we should actually have co-housing by now. I see the Douglas brothers did it in Brixton. So I see representation going, hopefully, towards that way. I mean, maybe it's me. They just don't want to do co-housing with me.
Oh, do it with you.
I think you buy a piece of land, like the lesbians in Barnet did.
There's a book called The Man Them, and they've got, and do you know that? And that's really interesting. But I only found that out through being at Metroland. So one of the yeah.
What's Metroland?
It's the studio based in Brent.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. And there's some interesting artists that are coming through doing that kind of radical thing, which I'm not part of, but I'm kind of interested to know about it. But that's what they talk about in that book, which seems really important.
Have they actually done it?
There's a book, yeah, the book.
There's a book, but have they got land in this country?
I don't know.
It feels like a good moment to sort of close on radical futures. But, we'll have coffees and receptions and things like that, so the conversations will continue. Thank you.